One of the other things that we do is, like I said, our investigators are incredible. You see that stuff on, Special Victims Unit, Law and Order, those are our special victims investigators. If we find out, because as Mary talked about technology, we have people who are abusers, they like to really take pictures. Please do. You know what? Because if we can find that, seriously, it's evidence, it's corroboration. And while we don't need corroboration anymore in the United States, let's face it, everybody watches CSI, people are looking for corroboration. It's great when we actually have, those videos. And, we have people who will do, investigators who have gone through garbage looking for evidence, and they will do what it takes. And we just really have dedicated people in terms of our investigators. But one of the other things that we teach our assistants to do, and this is something that you have to look at, is prosecuting cases without the victim, because we need to hold the defendant accountable. And one of the things I tell assistants, when someone kills someone, we don't have the victim. No one would sit here and justify and say a murderer should walk free. So we have to, it's just switching those same strategic and looking at the law and figuring out different strategies as to how we can hold a batterer accountable, as to seeing if we can hold victims of domestic violence accountable. And that's one of the things that we train our assistants to do. But the most important thing that I have learned in all of our years as prosecution, and our office really highlights, is that prosecutors cannot do it alone. As I always tell people, it is a Band-Aid. The criminal court solution is a Band-Aid. A Band-Aid is going to fall off. You have to do this in a team approach. And if a victim is only feeling like we only want her and we're only talking to her because we want to know whether or not, we're more important about getting a conviction, because prosecution is usually based upon convictions. Even though in our office, the most important thing is that the victim is safe. And sometimes those are cases that we don't win. But guess what? If a victim is able to move and get out of that situation safely, then that's a victory. And you have to define very differently as a prosecutor as to how you look at what is success in prosecution. But we have a witness aid service unit that's part of our victim aid service unit. And we have victim advocates, we have social service workers, we have social workers. And what we do when we're dealing with victims is what do you need? If it's a domestic violence case, you have to look at, she might need housing, she might need to change her school, she might need help advocating with these different agencies. We have people who will do all that. If you need someone who's going to sit there and hold your hand during the trial, we have victim advocates who will do that. We even have therapy dogs who now show up. Certain times you got to just push the envelope in terms of what can we do to make people feel more cooperative. More comfortable, which in turns will make them more cooperative, and which will add to us maybe better successfully prosecuting that case. And the last thing is that partnerships and collaborations are very important. You cannot be a DA's office and just figure out you have all the answers. You have to have collaboratives. And one of the most important collaboratives we have in the domestic violence field is actually up in Harlem, the Upper Manhattan Domestic Violence Collaborative. And this came from the African Americans Women's Service Committee. Actually did a survey on the needs of Harlem because we realized that so much domestic violence that was being reported was above 96th Street. We're like, how can we serve those people? How do we serve those women? And they did this whole study, and we have the collaborative. And what I love about the collaborative, that was like in 1999, and we are still going strong in 2013. And we're doing it without funding, from the government. We have been funded. They cut our funding because we were so good. And now we have no more funding, but we still do work. And it's comprised of civil legal attorneys. So if you have a family court issue, because you got to address family court if there are children, they need to talk to someone. If there are immigration issues, which there are many, we need to figure out, do they need a U visa? What kind of visa can they be applying for? We have that. We have counselors that are hospital-based. We have counselors that are not hospital-based. We will address the children. Because the children that are looking at domestic violence, who are living with this, we have to address that. Those are my future defendants. I hate that. Those are my future victims. I hate that. So we have to address that. You have to address, in our collaborative, we have someone who's part of the shelter, who runs a shelter. We have organizations that deal primarily with Spanish-speaking victims. It is comprised of like every organization that you could imagine. And you reach one person, you reach us all. So if somebody who's sitting there who works for Harlem Independent Living Corporation that deals with the deaf and disabled, because that's another group that is really, doesn't necessarily always have a voice in the domestic violence, they can pick up the phone and call me. They can say, Audrey, I need an ADA to sit there. This is what's going on. What can we do? And it takes away some of the red tape. But we're taking this to one step further, and the Family Justice Center. I don't know how many of you have heard of Family Justice Centers. And the concept of Family Justice Centers is that you have all of these organizations that are co-located in one place. And we are opening up a Family Justice Center along with the Mayor's Office to combat domestic violence at the end of this year. And on one side, it's going to be all of the Special Victims Bureau. So it's going to have domestic violence, child abuse, elder abuse, human trafficking, sex crimes. It's going to have our advocates are going to be there. And then on the other side, it's going to have all the social service. So it's going to have the civil attorneys. It's going to have all of different organizations to deal with victims from certain areas of the world. It's going to have everything. And it's kind of one-stop shopping. You walk down and you see one side, then you deal with your other needs. And it's going to be so incredible, and we're so excited about it coming finally to Manhattan, because it's really about having this multidisciplinary approach. It's so important for us to kind of take these lessons, and I guess this is some of what I think is the winning strategy. And I just want to say, on a personal note, maybe about 7 years ago, I, along with the head of our Witness Aid Service Unit, went to Romania, because we were actually trying to teach having discussions, I should say, with Romanian prosecutors about how you better support your victims, because they were having a hard time having cases go forward in the criminal justice system. And one of the things that we were trying to do is, because human trafficking, some of how those cases go in the system is very similar to domestic violence, about supporting a victim. And if you support a victim, then it's more likely that you will have a successful prosecution. So I think we have to look at prosecutors, going amongst and telling people, it's important. This multidisciplinary approach works, and that you really have to look at victims that way. And I know I've done it, the federal government has done it, prosecutors as well as prosecutors from other DA's offices. Just lastly, in terms of prevention, it's not enough for us as prosecutors just to be about prosecution. We have to be about education. And we really have to be about looking at what is the next generation of cases that are going to come, where they're going to come from. And they're going to come from our children. So we developed a curriculum where we go into the schools and we talk about what is a healthy relationship. And we talk about it, just in theory, like, what do you think is healthy? Like, what do you think is too much? Like, when he tells you what to wear, is that okay? But when he tells you what to wear, he's telling you can't see your friends. When he tells you what to wear, he's telling you can't see your friend, and he always wants to know where you're at. You layer it as to, if all these things are going on, that might not be what love really looks like. And you just really challenge people and challenge the teens on, let's seriously think about what is healthy. But it's important to do that in domestic violence. It's important to do that in trafficking. It's important to give them the tools that if they see this happening to somebody, what can I do? Because sometimes people feel powerless as to, what do I do if I see something going on? Like, how do I help? One of the first and foremost is not to judge. And that's one of the things that we always tell people. The quickest way, and I always, even when I'm telling assistants, I tell them this, and I say this to you as well. And when you were in a relationship with someone and your friends all said they hated them, did you go away or did you get closer? And a lot of times, let's be honest, because you have to then justify in your mind why you could never have made this mistake, why this person is so wonderful. And you bring that message to the children. You have to do community outreach. We have to talk. We have to talk at these here. We talked about the church. We've engaged the faith-based community. I did a training just a few weeks ago up in Harlem at one of the churches. You have to sit there and engage them, because you're right, they know a lot of what's going on in their congregations. And you really have to give them the tools to sometimes at least to make the referral and to just kind of recognize how they really need to understand where the people in the congregation are coming from. And particularly in terms of people who are not from the United States, who are immigrants, we have to figure out how to reach them so they can understand this country's criminal justice system. It's very different from other places. One of the things that we did, and Hildeland Cologne from our office, who was here, was really instrumental in setting all of this up. We did media roundtables. Because in New York City, you think if it's not from the Times, the Post, or the Daily News, right? It's that's the only newspapers. Well, if you're not from the United States, that's not necessarily true. There's a lot of Spanish-speaking press. There's a lot of Asian press. What?
Yeah,
Chinese newspapers, and some of it is because we translate a lot of the articles, of cases, is that it all started that we were looking at one of these newspapers and a crime had happened, and the victim blaming that we kind of thought was being portrayed. We're like, you know what, let's do media roundtables. Let's bring them in, kind of explain to them how we perceive domestic violence, how we see these cases. And you educate, but it also gives them access to our office, and we can start a dialogue, and they can ask questions. So we did these media roundtables in our office. We've done radio interviews, in different languages. It just can't be me Spanish speaking. You have to put people out there who speak other languages to get the message out. We're now going to the consulates, to have conversation with them. If you see domestic violence, you need help, call us. We'll help you figure out what's going on. At the end of the day, I think part of the strategy is you have to touch all these places. We have to touch upon that a victim of domestic violence, might walk into. And I guess our message, and the message that I would like people to take, is for victims to truly believe that they're not alone, is that we are really here to help them.